Welcome to Cure America. I'm Star Parker. Yes, here in Washington, D.C., it's almost like the city is alive again. Well, of course, a lot of the activity is because the House is in, the Senate is in, so the lobbyists are here in full bloom with spring. I'm so glad it's spring because little tourists are here. You can always tell the tourists because they have their little T-shirts. But you know who else comes to Washington during the time that the House is in and the Senate is in? Are people from their congressional district, these delegates. And they come up and they've got a bus here and a bus there. And so it was really fun coming into Washington today, walking over here to the office. And we're wanting to talk about the news of the day. So I have my panel, my expert panel. Richard Manning, thank you.
You're welcome.
Americans for Limited Government.
Americans for Limited Government. Hey, never a dull moment.
Well, I know. It's kind of exciting now because things are moving and it's getting alive. And I think that that's what people want when it comes to their legislators getting work done. I mean, we don't like to go in the kitchen, but it is noisy in the kitchen, but we have a full plate.
Well, you know,
these people.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of real challenges facing our country. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we're going to be able to resolve any of them in the current government structure in terms of Democrat-Republican breakdown. But the truth of the matter is, we do need to have a debate about it. We need to talk about it because people are going to be voting on these issues in just a few months. Mm-hmm. And they have to be given real alternatives so they can make intelligent choices.
I agree with you 100%. And Marty, you agree with him too, huh? Marty Dannenfelser, Government Relations and Coalitions for Cure, curepolicy.org. And you're on the Hill a lot. You're on there working with our coalition groups and getting a lot of requests to say, can you tweet out this? Can you do this for us? Because it is kind of noisy. It's kind of fun a little bit, even though it's desperate. We gotta say it is desperate for Republicans right now, but welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here, and lots of serious issues to talk about and lots of challenges to getting things done, that's for sure.
I know, but I'm an optimist. I think we will. I think people are going to take November really, really seriously. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about our illegals being registered to vote. Martin, you brought this to my attention. Are illegals being registered to vote? Speaker Mike Johnson, why is he in this chaos, if you will, a cloud of threat? Just who works like that? I mean, who wants their boss? She's not even his boss, standing over you all the time saying, I'm a fire, whatever. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, we want to talk about this dismissal of articles of impeachment without a trial. Didn't Mayorkas lie to the Congress about the border being secure?
On multiple occasions, he's misrepresented what the administration has been doing on the border. They have been engaged in, essentially, we know we've had an open border for all intents and purposes. We know we have about 2 million gotaways of people who we don't even know who they are who've come across the border in the last 3 years. And he's been on the job since almost day one of the Biden administration. He was actually confirmed to become the Secretary of Homeland Security on February 2 of 2021, 13 days after the inauguration. That is a really fast confirmation.
It really is.
And so
especially coming out of the turmoil of January 6th, and then we have this inauguration that people were still questioning, and wow.
And it was fast. And really,
how did it break down? Did the Republicans?
Six Republicans voted to confirm him.
Only 6 Republicans voted to confirm him.
Some of the people you would expect, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, and some more liberal members voted. Just
kind of pushed them through. But Marty, I'm wondering because the Congress does have a role in hiring these people. The Senate confirms them, but the House funds them. Was it illegitimate? I mean, Chuck Schumer's saying, well, they should have never brought it to us anyway. How do you not have a trial in the Senate when the House, if you respect the branches of government and you respect the duties of the House, they've sent over articles of impeachment. They're not even going to look at it. Don't they? They do have a right to do that, right? Don't they have, it's not anything unconstitutional, as the left is trying to say, about the Senate taking this up and having a trial, is there?
No, I mean, it's ultimately is a political process, and they had a very thin veneer of consideration. They went through and claimed that both of the articles of impeachment, they went one by one and said it didn't rise to the standard of what constitutes a high crime and misdemeanor, therefore it was unconstitutional.
Okay, so
they made these determinations on the 2 articles first, and then they moved to adjourn the trial and shut it down.
Okay, so what was the first one? Don't go too fast, 'cause I wanna
veneer
know.
of consideration.
Yeah, but I want to break this down, because I agree with you, and I think that this is the talking point of Republicans to say, wait a minute, you didn't even look at it. What was it that they were to look at? What was the first article? Was it actually saying you've not done your job? Do you know what the first one was?
I know there was one of them was that he was willfully disregarding the law and not enforcing the law, and then and I think the other was with, as Richard pointed out, that he was not being truthful with Congress.
And he wasn't. On both counts, the House was right. I just would like for people to remember when this House impeached President Trump 2 times. The Republicans had control of the Senate, and yet they allowed a trial.
That's true.
We had the full trial. We wasted 2-3 weeks on an impeachment trial in the Senate for the first one over Ukraine. And it was
Explain about Ukraine, because they're in the headlines again. So at that point, it was about some phone call.
Yeah, what happened? What happened in that impeachment trial was Donald Trump had a conversation with the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. In that conversation, he brought up because in the campaign, the Russian collusion, a lot of the Russian collusion stuff
that we found out was just a total bogus lie.
A lot of it seemed to come out of Ukraine, okay? And so he asked Zelensky, since Zelensky was brand new, can you look into that for me? What's going on over there? And by doing that, they said he politicized the call and made it about the campaign and not about about what was about foreign policy. And so so they impeached him over it. It revealed a couple of really interesting things. The most important reveals were we had people in the National Security Council who were more interested in the defense of Ukraine than the defense of America. Right. And they were the ones who basically leaked the content of what President Trump said. And President Trump then immediately did something you never really want to do as president. He released the transcript of the actual conversation. And so, everybody was talking about the same thing. You couldn't make anything up. And, but the point on this is related to Marcus.
No, I want to follow, because you just told me something that I hadn't heard, that Ukraine, when we kept hearing about this Russia collusion from Hillary Clinton's camp, that information came from Ukraine?
At the time, there was a lot of talk that there was Ukraine had an interest in trying to keep America at odds with Russia. They had relationships with the Obama-Biden administration. They had relationships with Hillary Clinton that were relationships that they knew what they were getting. They didn't know what they were going to get with Donald Trump.
That's interesting, because they weighed in again just now. They're like, hey, well, what's he going to do when he says, I'm going to make peace up here? But go ahead.
Right, so they didn't know what he was going to get.
So they thought that their interest was, and they felt that if Hillary wins this, we know what we have.
We know what we have.
would prefer that. And
that's correct.
They were complicit in this misinformation campaign.
That was part of a series of allegations that existed.
Wow.
Now, the fact is,
did you know some of this? I didn't know
subsequently, we've gone into the Russian collusion, and it wasn't even that sophisticated. It was all just made up by the Clinton campaign.
We found that part out, but I didn't know there was any root.
So the veneer which we didn't know then, Donald Trump sat there and said, I was told this came out of Ukraine. Can you check into it? And it didn't. Apparently, it doesn't appear as though it did. It came straight from the Clinton campaign.
Right. But your point was, and Marty, I'm wondering if you agree with his point, is that the Senate was controlled by Republicans, and they were delivered articles of impeachment, and they looked into it. What we're dealing with right now on something so important, I mean, we are either being invaded, or we're hearing from them, well, asylum is the law. So you can be invaded because we have a law that says you can be protected if you're here from a country that you don't want to work in because there's no work, because you keep hiring people that won't develop work or whatever their excuses are. They didn't even bother to look into the seriousness of this matter. There is really a problem, and Mayorkas is in charge. How come they won't even listen to it? Why won't they? They do have a right to fire him, right?
Yeah, they do. And then this sets a precedent. This is one of the big issues, was what kind of precedent was Schumer setting by just being dismissive of articles of impeachment coming over from the House? As you said, these other cases, in the case of Trump's second impeachment, they impeached him and the trial carried over after he was already out of office. So the idea of an impeachment is to kick somebody out of office if you don't think he's fit to be in that office. But in the case of Trump's second impeachment, he was already out of office, but they went through this political exercise just for the sake of piling on. In this case, they just refused to take a serious look at these allegations and bring in witnesses and hear testimony and do it the way you would normally do a trial. So Schumer has set a precedent, and the Senate has done this in the past. They've done this with the way they confirm judges, the way they do other kind of confirmation of other appointees, and
Change the rules.
They change the rules because they think it's going to help them at that point in time. And then when it comes back to bite them, then they're wailing and crying, oh my gosh, look what happened. But Republicans warned them beforehand, well, you go down this road, you may not like what happens when the shoe's on the other foot.
Well, we're going to talk about that even with what happened in the House with the speaker changeover and the new rules there. But going to your point about the rules changing for this particular individual, are the people of America, are they going to see through what the Democrats are attempting to do in the Senate this time? Because everybody's impacted by this border crisis. Who would want somebody in a job that would allow what has been going on for the last couple of years?
It should tell the American public that the Democrats in the Senate and the House are not serious about dealing with the border crisis. That's what you can derive from it. This was an opportunity to have real questions asked of Mayorkas, have real discussion in the Senate about what can be done, and with an attempt to come to a real solution. And instead, the Democrats in the Senate said, that's political poison to us. We're not going to talk about it. So we're going to literally change the rules and create a precedent forever that in order to avoid having this conversation, which is not good for us politically. And so that's
who we're going to believe, them? It's not good for them politically, or what we see in every community across this country. I mean, my goodness, the fear levels are very high, and the challenge that I have with it is it changes people's opinions about different ethnicities because you become afraid. You don't know. You have all these people from various countries that you're not familiar with, and now they're in neighborhoods that they're normally not. You did have the liberals then saying, well, see, now you guys are just a bunch of racists and bigots. This is a problem that has to be fixed. So, Marty, what would be the next step? Is it just shut down now? There's no more opportunity to say we need to have a trial?
That's shut down. I mean, I think what people are going to have to focus on is what is the cause of this immigration problem? And the cause of this immigration problem is on day one, Joe Biden decided to break everything that was already in place.
Name some of those things, because I think people forgot this point that you're making.
Well, one of the big things is he stopped the Remain in Mexico policy. Which says that while people are waiting for their asylum claims to be adjudicated, they have to remain in Mexico. They can't come into the United States, be released into the United States, and then have their claims considered over several years. And that way, there was more of a disincentive.
While that happened, we did not see this invasion. They had to wait there. What else?
He stopped building the wall. I mean, Trump had got about 400 miles of wall built, and he was trying to build more. And they had ordered a lot of the material already, and Biden just shut it down, and they sold some of the material, or else they just let it sit there. And
this is deliberate.
We were going through, what do they call it, Title 42 or something, had to do with we were in the midst of the pandemic, and therefore you have a health reason not to allow a lot of people into your country during a pandemic.
Well, I think that expired, though, didn't it?
Yeah, that
because,
expired.
It didn't even go to court.
Well, and then the other big thing is really
Yeah, it did. It went to court because they said that, well, how do you expand something that was done just for a pandemic? But go ahead.
But the whole premise of what they did is they then started really weakening the standard for what constitutes asylum. They basically gave a wink and a nod to people, just say the magic words, and people were showing up with note cards with pre-printed words about what they're supposed to say at the border. And people were coming in really who had economic claims. And asylum is supposed to be a fear of persecution, well-founded fear of persecution, a very serious fear, maybe a threat to your life or real serious harm to you and your family. But when people are coming here for economic reasons, they can apply and get in line with everybody else. But to claim asylum is it's just you wrecking the process.
It's a workaround for people who want to have unlimited immigration.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I know we're a little bit over time, but I have to ask you, Richard, because this sounds so deliberate. What kind of you have to be crazy to want to destroy your own country in this manner. And I think that it might be why a whole lot of just average good people are having trouble wrapping their minds around, could people really be that evil to want to destroy their own country?
Well, one of the things that I've had to come to grips with is that exact question. It's and I really hate the answer, because the people in the White House are smart. They do have, Mayorkas is smart. These aren't people who can't put one and one together and can't see what's happening. So you have to conclude that given the outcome and that their policies are driving the outcome, that this is the outcome they want. Now, shortly, the reason you want that outcome, and there's a lot of things talked about, voting, which we'll talk about later, but I believe the reason they want the outcome is because when Barack Obama said he wanted to fundamentally transform America, one of the ways you fundamentally transform America is you bring a bunch of people in the country who have no sense of what America is. And then you take the education system, you get a generation that hates our founding, and then you have people who get called racist and other things if they try to defend our founding. And at the end of the day, you end up very rapidly changing the popular consensus of what America's about. And that is the battle, and that's the battle for the soul of America that Joe Biden keeps talking about.
Well, he's talking about it, so we're going to lean in to that discussion, because that's exactly what he's doing, and we're starting to see it. Look at, the protests in New York, these are not people that have consistency with American founding principles. This is just a breakdown in our whole culture, which we're going to continue that discussion. I'm going to introduce you to somebody new after this break, and then I'm going to come back with my panel to continue the discussion, not just about what's happening at the border, which we must, because I'm finding out that they're registering them to vote, these illegals. I know they don't want us calling them illegal, but they're the opposite of illegal is legal. But I also want to talk to you about Mike Johnson, Speaker Mike Johnson. He's such a dear, wonderful Christian man. And I'll tell you, to see him still be able to smile through all of this, it's got to be a special anointing on him. We'll be right back. I'm getting so much feedback from all of you that you like this segment. We have to find a name for it. It's like a boutique organization introduction kind of segment. But anyway, I found a new one. It's a American Consumer Institute.
Yep.
Wow. There are boutiques here all over the place. And I know we talk a lot about the political world, and it's interesting to say the least. But I have a new special guest. Now tell me your name.
I'm Tirzah Duren.
Tirzah Duren. And what do you do?
I am the Vice President of Policy and Research at the American Consumer Institute. I'll probably call it ACI. It's a little shorter.
Well, and actually that is one of the reasons I think we have so much alphabet soup going on here in Washington, D.C., because we name these policy institutes and then we have to cut them short because people don't really know what that means. And so that's why I'm so thankful that you're here with me. Now, you have a very unique name.
Yes.
Say it again.
Tirzah. I always say it's like a tear and then za.
Tirzah, like
Tirzah.
the way. Oh, that's very nice. Is it from meaning in your family? Where are you from?
My mom really liked it. She found it in the Bible, and she just kind of felt like that, she was pregnant with me at the time, and so she's like, oh, that's the name, and so that's how I got. Now, where are you from? Were you born and raised here in the Washington area? I was not. I've moved around a bit, mostly West Coast, but I was originally from Montana. And then I did some time out in Oregon. Well, not did some time. I lived out in Oregon.
Okay.
And I lived in San Francisco as well.
Well, it feels like we're doing time here in Washington, D.C., and especially with what your group focuses on, because I was reading a little bit about it. And you're like advocacy for the consumer. You are concerned that when the left raises taxes and overregulation, that it doesn't just go away. They're not really attacking the wealthy. They're passing those prices down to the consumer. So can you explain a little bit to our public why they should be concerned about what they're hearing when it comes to how we should always tax the wealthy?
Yeah, so the American Consumer Institute, we've been around since 2007. And one of the things that we really work on is kind of informing policy decisions or agency discussions around what the impact on consumers will be. We've noticed that a lot of times those types of conversations can get a little bit sidetracked by either political agendas or, special interest groups that are either they don't really care about the consumer impact, that's not their focus, or they might just be kind of misinformed about what that is. And we found that that can lead to a lot of unintended consequences. As you said, those cost increases don't go away. And so a lot of times they can increase prices, make it harder for people to make ends meet, or kind of slow down innovations that can improve lives. And so that's why we really work to refocus these kinds of conversations on the consumer, because they're ultimately kind of like the end unit that gets impacted.
No one's really thinking about it. Yeah, that's one of the things that we focus on here at Cure Policy, because when we're attempting to address issues of culture, race, and poverty, we don't think generally about the unintended consequences. And so you want people to say, wait a minute, maybe we should think about that, especially the legislators. And when I was thinking about your group, I thought, there is this discussion right now, especially with inflation, that should we make sure that the corporation doesn't increase their prices, or should we actually have a conversation about how much food we intake? Let's just take that one as an example to say, should they have meals that are smaller in portion and save some money on the baggie that you take home, and instead of raising the prices? So give me an example of what you advocate. Like, this discussion we're having right now on inflation, what is it that your policy institute would be saying?
Well, we actually, I think it was last year, maybe it was a little bit more, we put out a report on inflation, and we kind of looked at what the underlying causes of that were. And we saw it was a lot of kind of government spending, but also there are some negative policies that can result in higher prices. We can see that in a lot of like antitrust conversations. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds, but there's a lot of kind of movement to get antitrust to focus more on, like, we don't want big companies. And at ACI, we really kind of take that argument. We look at the impact on the consumer. We're like, economies of scale are real. They can lower prices. Lower prices are generally a good thing. And so when it comes to inflation specifically, we know that it hits kind of the lowest income the hardest. And so we look at things across the economy. We look at government spending. We do some really good work on energy. And I think that can be a lot of times missed. But
that's right.
Every business uses energy. So if energy prices go up, you have across every step of the supply chain, you're increasing prices. And so we kind of look at the short-term and long-term effects. And a lot of our energy work and getting energy policy right and making sure that those prices are low and affordable so that manufacturing and production can happen without having artificially high prices. We look at that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, my goodness, you're so young and know so much. No, I'm really happy about it. In fact, our mutual friend Tyler is the one that said, I would bring my boss, but he's going to really get into weeds. So I'm going to bring the policy expert instead. I'm like, well, this is going to be a policy discussion that I do think people overlook. How is it that now this costs X and we haven't thought about what that process was and what role we play as an elected body, being able to then elect our officials who then come make these decisions with whatever interest, whether it's a lobby interest or, like you said, a special interest. But I want to go back to the point you made about the small businesses versus the corporation. We had that discussion here in the office the other day, and most businesses are small. And I think that a lot of people don't think about the impact of even something as simple as, well, it's not too simple, but this increase in the minimum wage. I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but if you're at McDonald's and you know you have to have someone cleaning, and you know you have to have someone cooking, well, the cleaner's making now $20. Well, the cook is going to make what? And then the cashier won't be there because they'll replace her with a machine, because now you've outpriced yourself in the marketplace. And so speak a little bit more about the impact of these excessive regulations and not keeping the consumer first in mind on that small businessman, because many Americans want that in their lives, but they also want to be a small business.
Yeah. Small businesses do. You were right. They make up most of the businesses kind of within the U.S. And I think the minimum wage conversation is really important, and it's kind of a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. We can look at workers and we can be like, oh, well, they deserve X, Y, Z, whatever price you want to put it on. But we have to look at not necessarily.
And who decides that price as well?
Yeah.
that's a conversation in itself. But go ahead.
If I'm the worker, I'm like, I think it's a little bit. Yeah, no. So, I mean, that's a different conversation. But, I mean, let's just say $15, $20.
Yes, 20. In California, just passed a 20, and businesses are already impacted and losing workers. The little ones are losing their workers, and the big ones are replacing with machines that quick. So,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think we really need to look at not necessarily like what we want to happen, right? Like the people who are proposing this, they want livable wages. Not a bad thing. good idea in theory, but we have to look at what will happen. And time again, we've seen, I think the Congressional Budget Office a couple of years back put out a report, and they're like, yes, about half of the people making minimum wage will be better off. However, the other half are going to be out of work. And no matter what the legislation says, it's kind of a cliche, but the true minimum wage is always zero. And so I think that's kind of a real thing we have to focus on. And yes, raising minimum wage may sound like a good idea, but you do increase the cost. You also increase the cost for businesses that are offering goods and services to low income consumers. So then the very people that you're trying to help are also kind of hurt on the other tail end of it as well. And it's not just really minimum wage, but
hurt twice, because these are also the ones that are trying to get into the workforce. So not only are those prices higher for them to try to get that widget that they're looking for, but also for their teenager to get a job, because some are not going to reach that threshold to be able to say, I deserve $20 an hour, $25 an hour. Where do you stop this, depending on what stage you live in or what the person thinks that their price should be, to put their labor on the table. And I think that you said zero, expand that, because that's really the bottom line. We, the ones bringing our talent to the table, do set our wage by bringing our talent to the table.
Yes. I mean, at ACI, we really kind of focus on consumer choice, and that works for workers as well. But we have to allow people to make the decision that's best for them. Yes, we all wish we could be like Kim Kardashian and make $1 billion. It's not the reality for most people. No amount of legislation is going to change that. And so what we really need to focus on is kind of maximizing the opportunities that are available to people. And when you set the floor so high, you eliminate a lot of kind of the entry level positions. And then there can be other conversations about like, should these jobs be careers? Do we need more skills training? That kind of thing. That's another kind of like manipulation or attempting to design the marketplace.
Well, but it does touch areas like, for instance, our cultural breakdown. I mean, when you think about the normal process, if you will, from going into the workforce as your teenage years, perhaps, and then you move up the chain depending on what you choose for your career. But if you choose family, marriage and family, you're almost penalized now because of all of these special interests in the workforce. So we only have a few little seconds. So I need you to tell us where people can find out more about what you're doing, because it's of interest to say, wait, somebody in Washington's thinking about me, the consumer? I would like for you to give me your website, more information that you would want them to know on something you may be working on very currently.
Yeah, well, we're working on a wide range of issues right now. We focus a lot on tech policy. That's always a hot conversation these days. Social media, AI, age verification, that kind of stuff. You can follow us on Twitter at The Consumer Pal. We're always putting a lot of our work out there. You can follow us on Instagram as well, and our website is theamericanconsumer.org.
Thank you. Really appreciate you joining me. I'm going back to my panel now. We're going to argue about the policies that we're discussing here in Washington this week. I'm glad we had a little break. But you see how it actually touches your life and what the Congress is talking about, what the House is talking about, what the Senate is talking about, ultimately affects you as a consumer. And so I'm so thankful that this particular group has come to join us here on Cure America. I'll be right back.
The Oversight Project released a bombshell report last night on your connection to the dark money NGO industrial complex of illegal immigration. I know you saw this from one of my colleagues just earlier. They found flyers throughout the Resource Center Matamoros refugee camp in Mexico telling illegal aliens, reminder to vote for President Biden when you are in the United States. We need another 4 years of his term to stay open.
This administration has shown the American people that it will exploit any measure to keep the border open. And the lead Democrat negotiator of this bill made clear to everybody, under this bill, quote, the border never closes. That's what he said, Senator Murphy. In sum, the bill does not secure the border, and it does not prevent illegals from coming into our country. We've had over 7 million encounters at the border since President Biden took office. We've got over 2 million known gotaways. We got over 300 people who are suspects on the terrorism watch list. They're all in the country.
Oh my goodness. I mean, this Liz Peek Fox News reporter, Marty, you sent me this article. She said Marjorie Taylor Greene is an idiot. She is trying to wreck the GOP. Now, I don't know that we should go that far to start calling each other names. It is like Thanksgiving dinner. You want to try to pretend you like the uncle that you know is going to just really start a fight with everybody. But this has gotten serious. And in fact, in this column, Liz Peek says, it's high time someone in the Republican Party told Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to turn all that bombastic, self-serving showmanship and drama queen energy on Democrats and stop trying to defeat her own party. She kind of has a point. I mean, every little time that anyone says, but we have to do something, you're going to threaten to lose, it cost them their job. Marty, we've had discussion and you've talked to me about some of the rules that changed during the debate, the opportunity once the House, the Republicans gained the House. Go a little bit into what happened and the unintended consequences that now we're all experiencing, getting into the weeds of every part of every legislation, and then this threat that we're going to take your job from you if you don't do it our way.
Well, I think some of the conservatives in the Republican caucus were concerned that their leadership had not fought hard enough on some issues in the past, and they wanted to have more leverage to make sure they fought for them in the new Congress.
Well, that was true.
And they
for a long time.
They insisted on this provision that said any one member can offer a motion to vacate the chair, which means the chair, meaning the speaker's chair, that you could offer a motion that the speaker be removed. And that was highly debated, and the idea that it should be just one member could do that was, a lot of people were very concerned about that would just allow one potentially reckless member or one member who has their own personal grudge or something to try to use it against the speaker. And in this case, you get the votes of the other party. When they did actually take down Kevin McCarthy using this procedure, there were only 8 Republicans who voted for it and then 208 Democrats. Yeah. So the idea that the Republicans are using leverage, but they have to use the leverage of the Democrat votes, overwhelmingly Democrat votes, to work against the will of their own caucus. And I think that's what's going that's what's going on right now. And they could tell the speaker every time they don't agree with something, they can threaten to take him down.
Which
in this
is one
case,
of the unintended
Ukraine people feel very strongly
we'll get
about
into
it.
the details about what this is, but I want to stay here a minute, Richard, because
the single thing to understand the House of Representatives, you only really have to understand one thing. If you have 218 votes, you can do anything. Okay? That's the rule. That's the abiding rule. It's why Nancy Pelosi could rule the House with an iron fist, because she had 218 votes that would vote with her. And so likewise, while one person can make a motion to vacate the chair, you have to get a majority of the House, people who are attending in the House, to vote in favor of the motion to vacate. So while you'd have that one person can force a vote, in this case, since the Republicans now have effectively a 2-vote majority, and on Monday they'll have a 1-vote majority, that means that effectively 2 Republicans saying, I want to change speakers, can effectively fire the existing speaker.
Okay, let's back up a little bit, because I think that now we need a little bit more discussion on how the system was designed. You brought up Nancy Pelosi and why she was able to not come out of the room without a consensus and everybody nodding yes. What is the speaker's role? How is it that, first of all, we got to the place what Marty mentioned, to where the speaker had so much power that the legislators didn't feel that their voices were being heard, even though they won in their districts?
The speaker is a representative of the entire House. The Republicans have a majority leader. The Democrats have a majority leader or minority leader.
Minority. When they're minority.
But then the speaker is elected by the whole House and has duties that deal with the whole House in terms of room allocations and Capitol Police allocations and things like that. So the way it's built is you have to get a majority of the House to vote for a speaker. And as a result, if a majority of the House loses confidence in the speaker, then they can replace the speaker. It is
That has been always.
That's always.
And
been
then what had changed was now the
with-
new one rule, because it was heavily debated during this time.
What Pelosi did, because she had the pandemic, they changed the rules to mean that to make it so members didn't have to show up in Washington D.C. to vote. So she allowed proxy voting, and hence she had 100 members' votes in her pocket. Because a lot of these Democrat members weren't showing up at all in Washington, D.C. for 2 years. So she was able to pocket any votes.
Right.
And so she always came into the game with a majority of her own caucus on her side because she was holding their votes and just voted.
But Marty, because when Speaker Newt Gingrich was here, he held his caucus together, and there was no pandemic. So something has changed more than just this opportunity to vacate. And now, we are so at war with each other. This girl writes, because she's now really mad at Marjorie Taylor Greene because she feels that we're in an election year. That's why I brought Thanksgiving dinner. We have some, new people listening in, if you will, because, the little baby now is 5 and 6 years old and can hear all of these arguments we're having about our family business. Maybe we shouldn't have them out loud. She said that Greene, who was elected by a total of 170,164 voters in 2022 in a district that the Cook report rates R plus 202. So it's a Republican solid district. She has nothing really to lose. She says she doesn't like any of it and would rather just burn down the House than to work toward the greater good. And then she goes on to say, and the greater good, unless she and her fellow discontent in Congress have forgotten, is defeating Joe Biden in November. It is really noisy. Have they forgotten that we have something bigger, or are they really that uncomfortable with what used to happen from the time of Newt? Because things did change. It's no need of us pretending it didn't. We went through John Boehner, we went through Paul Ryan. People lost confidence in that order that you just set, that where the speaker could be trusted. Should she be looking beyond this one area? You mentioned Ukraine, and that seems to be the hill died on. But if that happens and we go through a summer of just discontent, and especially if Ukraine then loses in the summer, we could actually lose in November.
Well, what she's really saying, she doesn't want them to be able to vote on it. So that when people claim that this whole idea of allowing one member to offer this motion to vacate was defending the democratic process, small d, but if you're insisting that we're not going to allow someone to vote on a policy, well, how is that consistent with the democratic process,
especially when much of that discussion during that time we were all here was the fact that they were feeling that they weren't having an opportunity to vote.
Yeah,
so if they want to bring something to vote on it, she could vote against it, but why not allow it to come to vote?
Well, because the system is actually the way it used to work, which you have to understand. It used to be if you had 250 Republicans, which we haven't had ever, but if you had 250 Republicans and needing 218, you would sit there and you'd say, okay, if 126 Republicans in conference agree on something, we're going to go forward with what the majority of the Republicans agree on. That has completely broken down. There's a lack of trust within the Republican Party, and there's different objectives within the Republican Party.
That's true too.
And I would argue that the reason that that Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are looking at this as a possibility is they look at what's happening in the world and they say the world's on fire.
It is.
There's a lot of problems, and we have to actually deal with them. And when we won't deal with things like the immigration and the border, when we're sitting there putting $60 billion into Ukraine, we won't put a dime into defending our own border. People say that's wrong.
Yeah, but some people, because like Justice points out, she has 170,000 that she represents. Other people are not wanting that to be the majority of the energy in the room, and there are a lot of people who really are feeling sorry for Ukraine. And one of the things that I'm wondering about is why are we seeing the kids from, what's happening in Gaza, but we don't know anything about details in Ukraine, yet we've been asked. I keep hearing, well, they're corrupted. What? All these nations are corrupted, but do you really not help them when you promise to help them? So my question now, because we only have a few more minutes in this segment, is the bigger war, the greater good. Is this
helpful to make sure that by the time we get to the election, everything has cooled down enough to where people will not be so discontent and unwilling then to put the Republicans in power. This is not looking good. In fact, it was either this article or another one that pointed out that before when John Boehner was, not John Boehner, when the one they just ousted, Kevin McCarthy, that the nation was saying almost at 50-50 numbers that, okay, we see that they are functioning. Now that split is so wide and they hate the Republicans. I'm just not sure that all this noise is doing a service.
It makes the Republicans look very dysfunctional. It looks like they're engaged in a circular firing squad, and they're so much time firing at one another that they're not looking at the bigger picture. She laid out a scenario in that article that if Joe Biden gets reelected with both houses of Congress, the things they could do, like packing the Supreme Court and doing all kinds of other very far
she laid out
things.
a lot of
she
stuff
laid out
that made me want to talk about it.
And regulations and all kinds of
Which
things.
is a bigger fear. So I'm wondering, Richard.
The real risk here is that you end up, because you have such a narrow majority, one vote majority.
Because people are quitting after what they did to Kevin, and now this constant threat and calling people out their names, cursing. We have serious issues in this Congress. And so now we're quitting, and next thing you know, a few more quit. We don't even have to vote to lose the House.
Right,
Republicans can lose the House this summer.
They're in the process, but but you're going to replace McCarthy in May, and there's a number of votes. Republicans are going to come back in, so you're going to end up with the Republican majority.
You mean Johnson?
Yeah. Well, no, when McCarthy retired.
Yes. Oh, you're talking about
we're going to end up with another. They're having another election. They're going to send a replacement. Yeah. So that'd be a +1.
Yeah, but, that's true. That's true because he's winning.
The point I forgot
his name. McCarthy. He's a hand-picked McCarthy, though, so they didn't really get rid of McCarthy.
True. We have to, and I identify as a Republican, so I will say we have to figure out how to have discussions and arguments and fights about the direction of the country and do it behind closed doors, and not automatically say, if I don't get my way, I'm going to take action that causes the whole system to fall apart.
But that's what's beginning to happen, Marty. They tried that. One meeting that was supposed to be private, they went in the back room, they're private. 5 minutes later, it's on the Twitter. They had a retreat. Come on, we got to meet together, private. We're not going. I'm not going. This is children's game, and yet, as you mentioned earlier, it's too serious this time. Losing in November really does change the soul of America.
As I think Patton said, losing is not an option.
It's not an option,
and it is and at some point in time. And I'm just going to speak as somebody who has been a child and has been an adult. Hopefully, still am an adult. But you have sometimes. You have to suck it up and do your job. And I actually agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene on a lot of the things she's fighting for. Okay, so let's distinguish. So let's distinguish the issues she's fighting for, which I agree, and the tactics that are being used to fight for those issues.
Tactics and timing.
Because the way you win those issues, because Biden's on the border, Biden's not going to implement anything you do on the border for the next year, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. The way you win those issues is you have a Republican majority of at least 15 votes in the House. You have a Republican majority of at least 3 or 4 in the Senate, at which point you are able to then work those issues out, negotiate with some Democrats that you're going to have to negotiate with if it's a regular bill, and fund the things that need to be funded to protect our border, to protect our military, to make decisions about foreign policy in Ukraine and the like, to protect and provide arms to Israel, and most importantly, rearm ourselves, because we have put ourselves at risk by throwing arms that we had stored here into Ukraine, and we have not been replacing that weaponry.
I'm looking forward to speaking with Elaine Donnelly about that, because she does that boutique organization on military readiness, and I'm just wondering, are we going to be ready? Marty, final on this segment, what Richard said is this greater good about the Republicans winning. He's made a really good argument there. Do you think that we'll be able to get there? Will this energy tone down a little bit? And I gave a red lipstick on the front. I don't know if I should have done red. Maybe I should have done pink lipstick to quiet it down. Will we get to the place where the good guys, I'm part of the red team,
And I know we have bad players in the red team, but I want our team to win. There's too much at stake. You just mentioned a few of those things. I'm looking at what's going to happen on abortion alone. This is not going to be good for us if, as you said, it's not an option. It's just not an option. So will many realize that it's just not an option? We need to tone this stuff down.
Well, one of the things that happened just recently is that the speaker went down to Florida and he met with President Trump, and President Trump expressed support for the speaker. He says he's doing the best job he can under very difficult circumstances. And so I think he realizes the speaker is trying to do the right thing. Even on some of these issues where there's division over Ukraine, he's tried to craft a bill that's different than the Senate passed bill so that there's more transparency. People are concerned, well, where's the money going? He wants to have more transparency about that. He's trying to put some other provisions in the bill that perhaps could get a majority of Republicans
keep hearing about where the money is going, and we could talk about this all day but I'm wondering, they're saying they're dying. So so we're worried about if they're going shopping. They're dying. They're really dying, and we're not getting any numbers of how many of them are dying. And I saw their president say, and we're all ready to die. We're not going to become Russian. So I really think that we should take seriously what they're saying. And if they all die in front of us like that, just needs some thought too in prayer.
Well, that's the urgency with both Israel and Ukraine.
Exactly.
Is that they're at war.
They're at war.
And they both are in need of support.
And that's serious. Okay, we're going to have to end it there because I have run out of clock, and that means I can't even get a commercial break in. So that means you're going to have to go to curepolicy.org and make sure you keep us alive. I am so thankful for all these podcast people. Did you guys know we have 45,000 downloads on podcasts? I don't know what that means, but I do know that we have one more segment because we have something really important to talk to you about. Are illegals really being registered to vote? Right after this. So Richard was explaining to me what the 45,000 downloads means, and he said, it's growing. That sounds good. It's not a whole lot yet, but I said, but we do also have our networks, and we love our networks. You know why I love my networks? Because you guys can see us. Those podcast people can't see us. And we do have a makeup artist, and we wear our fashion, and we have pictures, and we have studio stuff, and we really appreciate you. NRB, TCT, Real Life. Oh, who am I missing? Worldview Weekend, the Financial Network we're still on. Oh, my goodness. In fact, we picked up a new network down in Florida that is only there, and boy, they like us.
Excellent.
Yes, out in the Orlando area. I know the owner of the station. She said, I'm putting you on. I'm putting you on. So she did. But guess what? I heard that illegals are being registered to vote. We know that could happen because now the DMV, you register to vote, all kind of places you're registered to vote. They'll stand out in front of a grocery store and ask you want to register to vote, and they're not taking ID. So it looks like Rep. Chip Roy has a SAVE Act. And some are arguing that this would fix the problem. So Marty, I'm going to ask you first because, you follow this stuff. I know for Cure and especially the groups that are bringing information to say, hey, you might want to think about this particular bill. And one of the reasons they tell us is so that we'll go help them get other people to sponsor their bill. Are illegals registering to vote?
Well, the circumstances are there that are creating the opportunity for them to do so. So this is something we have to get our arms around. Richard was talking earlier about, and we all were really, what is the reason that they're not controlling the border?
This is unbelievable.
And the reason that they're not controlling the border, I believe, is political. It makes no sense other than that they're trying to get millions of new people in here so that they can vote. They think are going to vote overwhelmingly for their candidates.
Yeah, but that's downright stupid now because those people that they're letting in here are now protesting even them. This is unbelievable that they would do that as if they know what these folks are going to do. I mean, these protests that we just saw in New York, it's not even controllable. Here in Washington, I had to walk into another one. Every time I go out on the weekend, I'm stuck in this beautiful nation's capital, Mars. You just want to go out for an afternoon walk, and you're walking into these people that are all wrapped up in black and white stuff, and we have a flag that's foreign to our country and mad.
Although I think that's a different group of people who came from another part of the world.
I know that. I'm just saying that, but the inconsistency of what Richard brought up earlier to our values, we have founding principles, and the organized system that we have to allow 1 million a year to come in, make sure that they understand that. They go through classes, they learn about our system, and they're hungry for becoming an American.
So anyway, I'm
Well, the
talking
idea-
off of what you were saying about
Yeah.
why would, I don't care how evil you are, why would you bring in people that you don't even know who they are and you really don't know that they're going to consistently just keep voting for you?
Well, like you said, Obama wanted to fundamentally transform America. He had a whole different view. He was a citizen of the world, you know. He had a view of the world that America was too arrogant in the world, and the world didn't like us because we were too arrogant. He wanted us to be more humble. And this was all part of the process. But I think Biden thinks that the people that he's trying to bring in, primarily from Central and South America, are going to vote overwhelmingly for him and his party.
So that's
and I think the concern is people say, well, yes, it could over a period of years that they could become citizens and then vote. I think there's real concern that they might be trying to get a lot of these people to vote much sooner than the point at which they get citizenship, that their bodies are here, their people are here, and as you said, people are walking around by the metros and on street corners signing people up.
Yeah.
There's no verification of who they are, and even as part of this process, they're signing people up for all kinds of benefit programs, and at the same time, they're telling all the agencies, this is a whole of government approach in the Biden administration, you have to go out and do a massive voter registration effort for all the people who get your benefits, and meanwhile they're bringing in all these migrants and giving them benefits.
Oh, this is interesting.
So there's an intersection between all the people that are signing up to vote and all the people that get benefits, and a lot of the migrants are coming here and getting driver's licenses.
No, I understand all that, Marty,
IDs.
because
These are the things you need to vote.
Yeah, well, and that's true. They are. I mean, I live in I'm a resident of California, and we do have where these opportunities are alive and well, and then we even have the law out there now that if you're going in for welfare benefits, they will help you. So tell me then about this Chip Roy's SAVE Act, because most people don't think that the federal government has a hand in all of this.
Well, the federal government sets the rules for, states are primarily responsible for voter registration for implementing elections. There are some overarching guidelines that the federal government does set.
Okay.
And what Chip Roy's trying to do is to create an overarching guideline where the idea that people who are not eligible to vote are not participating in the process. And just so you know, right now there are 16 states that will give people driver's licenses who are non-citizens, who are here illegally.
16 states. If you're here illegally.
If you don't have paperwork given to the government, you can still get a driver's license.
Now I'm really mad because I'm just trying to get that stupid real ID, and they want me to prove 99,000 pieces of paper.
Well, they don't need that.
Go ahead.
But the other piece of this is, as strange as it might seem, a state like California, Oregon, Washington, they have all mail-in balloting. So consequently, if you're sitting there you're getting your ballot through the mail, you're voting, you're registered with nobody seeing you, because you could register absentee with nobody seeing you. You never have to actually face anybody to cast a ballot. And so you end up with a system where you have our votes are supposed to be anonymous when we go inside the ballot booth, but you're not supposed to be anonymous as to who is actually participating, because we have a system of voter registration which assures that it's supposed to assure that only eligible people vote. And fundamentally, the reason that matters, and most people hear this voting stuff, their eyes glaze over. The reason it matters is the fundamental thing that drives our government is the consent of the governed.
Right.
And if you break the voter process, where people who are not don't have a stake in the system, in the success of the country, if they're able to participate, then what you effectively have done is you have broken the consent of the governed.
Yeah.
And the legitimacy of our government comes from that. And that's directly from the Declaration of Independence.
This is what it's saying, that this SAVE Act is to, throughout the Democrat effort to cement one-party rule. That is what they're after. And what you're saying is exactly right. In fact, one of the reasons that I actually fly home just to vote on Election Day is I do get it in the mail. And I have wondered how confident should I be in that I'm going to fill this little piece of paper out that goes to an address that no one verified. That goes to my P.O. box. And I get to count that.
By the way, it's not supposed to go to your P.O. box.
And it does.
Okay.
It's unbelievable, the breakdown in the system. And so I really like the way you articulated, because, we are we are the people. The Constitution is we the people. We elect representatives, and then they come here and do our bidding. And when they don't, they get the Marjorie Taylor Greene whip at them. Okay, hey, she is kind of letting them know that no, you were sent here for some reasons, but with the tactics and the timing, we'll have her appreciate maybe this time next year. Well, Marty, this one party rule. I mean, we do see that in some of these countries that these Democrats admire, but that won't work in this country. This is just not how we're made. So what is the next step, this Chip Roy Save Act? What happens next?
Well, they like to have some hearings in committee and then actually bring it to the floor vote. I think they want to challenge the Democrats who say that, well, no, these are fair elections and there's nothing to see here, to say, well, why shouldn't we verify that the people who are registering to vote are actually eligible to vote, that they are who they say they are, and they're actually citizens.
Okay, so that's what
even
this is
if they're
asking
here legally,
for?
there's the people here are technically maybe here legally in some cases, but that's not the standard for voting. The standard for voting in federal elections is you have to be a citizen of the United States.
Right.
And there
are a lot of rules that govern that. I think they have rules against prisoners voting, a lot of different places.
They vary by state,
Yeah, they vary. That part varies by state. Okay, so then tell me about this national part of it. What is this bill asking for?
Well, one of the things is there already is national legislation called the National Voter Registration Act, which I believe in around 2013, they passed that legislation, and it imposes some restrictions on the states that if someone presents certain types of ID, they have to accept it. They can't challenge it. So this is the problem, as we were saying earlier, with people getting driver's licenses when they're not here legally and so on. Now they have a valid form of government ID, and if they could just go in and vote, then you have to accept their ID, except the underlying problem is they're not eligible to vote. And if you haven't verified that they are indeed eligible to vote, that they're a citizen of the United States,
so this will be a federal standard to say, you must verify. Come on, guys. This is not fair to other states that you're not verifying. I'm wondering about another problem with what we're seeing with this invasion and now spread all across the country is when we have our next census. They're going to start drawing congressional lines based on these new numbers.
Well, they've been doing that all along, and it's one of the points of contention. Donald Trump attempted to have a point in the census question about whether somebody was here legally or not, or whether they're a citizen or not. And
Please don't. We don't automatically ask that already.
We don't ask that.
Oh,
and there's a fight.
Messed up, God. We got a lot of work to do.
And truthfully, there's a district, a congressional district in East LA that ends up with about 40,000 people voting in it, because it's largely people who are not eligible. And so you end up with whereas other districts, you need to get 150, 200,000 votes to win. Marjorie Taylor Greene won her district by 173,000 more votes than her opponent. So so when you get down to it, you have a disparate, people who live in a district that's predominantly people who are ineligible. Those citizens have far more representation on a per capita basis than somebody who lives in a predominantly citizen district.
But that's not the only challenge with what we're allowing to happen here, because when you draw those lines, we're also solidifying blue districts and red districts. So it's breaking down cohesiveness in the society as well.
If we had, there's two things they use the census for. One is to determine the redistricting lines, and that would be something Congress should do something about. But secondly, they also determine the spending and how much money goes from the federal government to the state government based upon population. And as a result, a state like California, it's in their interest to have as many people in it, whether they're legal or not just for political purposes, but for the hard cash. It's about government cash.
I wonder if the governor of Texas is going to try to get everybody back. Wait, come back now.
There's one other political factor in this. It affects how many electoral votes a state has. So it has an impact on the presidential election.
Okay,
when California has the most electoral votes, even though they don't have, a lot of the people there are not really people who are eligible to vote because they just have these sanctuary cities, and they encourage all these people.
Well, we're out of time.
But now they have more impact in the presidential election as well.
And that's not right. And we're going to continue to sort through this type of news to find some truth, because that is not right.
That is not how our country was designed. No wonder it's so noisy in the kitchen, and now it's kind of spilling out into the discussions in the House because there are people there that are saying this is not right and we're going to stop it. Well, guys, we're out of time again. Hey, thanks for being with us again here on Cure America. And please continue to support us through curepolicy.org so that we can continue to bring you the good news of the gospel as well as the good news that's happening here in your nation's capital. Don't forget what Ecclesiastes says, that Solomon told us through Ecclesiastes, that here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. That's man's all. The next verse does say we will give an account, but we'll talk about that next time.